Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Today we're going to talk about making a drug-free recovery from schizophrenia. It's approximately 4 years. So on March 4th, 2021, I made a video, a drug-free recovery from schizophrenia. Today's March 18th, 2025. So it's about 4 years since I made a video going through the steps you can take to make a drug-free recovery from schizophrenia. So hopefully I learned something in that time. About 75% of people with schizophrenia should be able to successfully get off an antipsychotic if they're on a antipsychotic. If you're newly diagnosed with schizophrenia, the prognosis is better. And Abram Hoffer and Jaka Sakla, with the open dialogue approach, achieved a 90% success rate in newly diagnosed schizophrenics. But once again, if you have had schizophrenia for a period of time, the recovery rate is slightly lower than that. So we'll begin the presentation by talking about the first thing I'd recommend people do to recover from schizophrenia is True Hope. Has a multivitamin that's specifically geared to the brains of schizophrenics and bipolar patients. It's meant to provide all the nutrients the brain needs to become healthy again. And it has approximately a 70% cure rate, with patients needing a much reduced amount of medication of around 1 milligram dose of haloperidol equivalents. 44% take any medication. That means 56% don't need medication while on True Hope. And that's versus 22% who do not need medication while not on True Hope. So that's a 34% difference in absolute terms, in terms of how well you can do without medication, or how much you can reduce your dose of medication if you have a case of schizophrenia and you use the True Hope multivitamin with the amino power extra free form amino acids, which are also very helpful. So Abram Hoffer in the 1950s discovered that B3 can take people out of an LSD trip, and he postulated that schizophrenia was similar to an LSD trip. So he used B3 on his schizophrenic patients and achieved incredible results. An 80% cure rate in non-chronic schizophrenics, a 65% recovery rate if ill for 10 plus years, and if taking B3 for 3 or 4 plus years, and continuing to take it actually. So that is defined as a job or a family. So you do have to take B3 longer to see the effects. If you have a chronic case, if you have a non-chronic case, just taking B3 for 1 month increases your recovery rate. It doubles your recovery rate 1 year later. So, but you should take it longer than that. But if you do have a newly diagnosed case with schizophrenia, just taking B3 for 1 month, 3 milligrams a day in 3 different doses, provides a doubling of your recovery rate 1 year later. So it's a remarkable benefit, B3. He often added some zinc, some manganese, and some B6. He also often used antipsychotics. So he was not dead. In the research literature, I found that he often used antipsychotics. A number of patient accounts I've heard on YouTube of them talking about being treated by Abram Hoffer. They did not use antipsychotics, but I believe he often did use antipsychotics also. And the B3 helped on top of the antipsychotics. Cerebral allergies, often milk and or gluten, but could be literally anything. It could be a hygiene product. It could be like a soap or a shampoo. It could be a cleaning product. It could be a food you eat. So there's all kinds of things that you could react to and could lead to your mental symptoms of schizophrenia. And if you find a cerebral allergy and you cut out that allergen, then you get about a 50% cure rate, which is actually similar to the cure rate before antipsychotics were used, actually. So it's not a great increase to the cure rate, but you should feel a noticeable improvement if you avoid your cerebral allergen. And people have a lot more allergies today than they did 70 years ago. So it's a bigger factor than mainstream medicine currently acknowledges. Socializational therapies, Jaco Sekla, with the open dialogue approach, had an 87% cure rate. So just using psychological therapy and trying to integrate people's mind space and also integrate them into the community led to an 87% cure rate for schizophrenia. And he basically had a dialectic dialogue with the patient, but they also provided community supports and tried to get them into a job, etc., etc. Another thing you can try is the ketogenic diet. So the ketogenic diet, Lauren Kennedy West, who's the biggest schizophrenic YouTuber in the world, has successfully put her case of schizophrenia into remission using the ketogenic diet. There are a number of people who have cured their case of schizophrenia with a ketogenic diet, and according to one study, there was a 46% improvement, with 6 out of 10 patients reducing their medication dose. And often you have to take a minimal dose. If you've been on the antipsychotic for a while, you have to continue to take a low dose of the antipsychotic, even once you're in remission. Because your body kind of gets habituated to the chemical, which is a slightly annoying statistic, I suppose. An internal sense of control. So if you feel like you're running your life and some higher god or devil or authority or a parent is running your life, and you don't feel like you're in control of your life, that leads to a lower recovery rate. So 75% don't need medication if they have an internal sense of control, if they feel internally empowered, versus 40% who don't need medication if they have an external sense of control. Fish oil led to a 20% improvement, a 4x decrease in at-risk groups becoming schizophrenic. So if you feel you're at risk of becoming a schizophrenic, it's highly recommended to take some fish oil, and you can decrease your odds of getting a full-blown case of schizophrenia. Or if you have a parent or 2 parents with schizophrenia, taking some fish oil helps prevent schizophrenia developing. But it's also good if you have schizophrenia, because it leads to a 20% improvement to the positive and negative symptom scores of schizophrenia. The next thing I'll mention is aerobic exercise. It's a 28% improvement to the PANSS scores, positive and negative symptom scores of schizophrenia. It really gets your brain moving again. And if your body moves, your brain moves. So there's a lot of cobwebs that build up in a schizophrenic mind, and exercise was the game-changing thing that I did. A friend of mine, Scott, got me out exercising, and it really led to a series of leaps in my ability to take care of my schizophrenia. So I'm internally grateful to him for getting me out exercising, and I highly recommend exercise as a good first step, along with fish oil, if you're trying to recover from schizophrenia. They're very easy to do, and once you can think a little clearer, you can start rationalizing and trying the True Hope or the B3 or the cerebral allergies, or trying to use some of the other tips in this list. Another thing that helps is occupational engagement. So keeping busy is a real game changer. So if you are highly occupied, that's a 40% improvement. If you're mediumly occupied, that's a 23% improvement. So it is hard to stay highly occupied as a schizophrenic, especially on an antipsychotic, because of the negative symptoms of schizophrenia. But if you can stay occupied, it would be worth trying to go to school or get a job or volunteer or attend a church group or a sports team, etc., etc., etc. So church, here I'll mention church again. Church and or tearfulness have been linked to recovery from schizophrenia. So there was a study showing that people who attended church were more likely to recover from schizophrenia, and people who cry a lot were also more likely to recover from schizophrenia. So there's something to one's life story kind of having a break and then trying to connect the life story together again that is a factor in schizophrenia. Yoko Kansan, or Yai-Gan-san, which is a Japanese or Chinese herbal medicine, led to a 60% improvement in treatment-resistant schizophrenics. It was less for the PAN score, but this was a global functioning score, and it led to a 60% improvement in that score in terms of how well you could function with your schizophrenia. So you could consider giving Yai-Gan-san a try. Folate deficiency, so about 12% of people have low folate, and there is actually a 50% improvement to the PAN scores if you have low folate and then you supplement folate, and then you get a 50% benefit. So there is something, if there's something wrong with your diet, or you feel like you're not getting enough vitamins and minerals, you can try True Hope. True Hope is a fantastic way to get those vitamins and minerals that your body needs, along with the amino power, which provides the amino acids your body needs. But you can also potentially test yourself for folate. If you have low folate, you can take some folate and you should see a 50% improvement. The next thing I'll mention is trickier to do, though I will say keto is somewhat tricky to do. It's a little bit expensive to do keto. It's not too hard, really. You get a bunch of nuts, some high-fat dairy, some meat, some low-calorie vegetables, and you can eat keto pretty simply, but it is a little more expensive. The carnivore diet is a little trickier. Just eating products from animals is more challenging than the keto diet, but it also seems to provide a greater benefit. So if you've tried the True Hope, if you've tried B3, I've tried B3, I've tried True Hope. They got me 60% of the way there, but I'm gonna retry using keto, and I think that might get me the other 40%. But if you can't get all the way to remission using some of these earlier therapies, you can try the carnivore diet. 48% of patients who used it had complete remission. 48% improved, and 4% were unchanged, and 0% got worse. This was for all mental illnesses, though. Wasn't schizophrenia specific. I would suspect for schizophrenia specifically, the numbers are a little bit worse, just because schizophrenia is difficult to recover from, more difficult to recover from than bipolar or depression or anxiety. But it, less challenging to recover from than a multiple personality or disorder or dissociative identity disorder. But the other thing I'll mention is helminth therapy, symbiotic intestinal worms. There was a small study showing they were 95% effective for bipolar patients. Schizophrenics have a similar physiology to bipolar patients, so helminth therapy might cure schizophrenia also if it cures bipolar. But that's more speculative because, again, it was quite a small study. Okay. So what to do? I don't know if this is necessary because the physician's interview is quite just as accurate as this testing tool. But I do recommend you test yourself for schizophrenia using the Hoffer-Osmond diagnostic tool. I made a video about testing yourself for schizophrenia. You can totally do a test at home and see if you have schizophrenia as accurately as a physician can tell, and maybe as accurately as a good friend or a parent can tell also. But sometimes they don't recognize the signs as well as a physician, but often they can tell if you're acting strangely. So test yourself, try some treatments, and retest. I do think if you all you might need is the True Hope protocol. I did the True Hope protocol, the B3 and the cerebral allergies, and I once again got 60% of the way to being cured from schizophrenia. Unfortunately, I ended up having a relapse because I was a little bit too eager to recover completely. And a lot of people don't recover the first time they try to recover either. Often, if you're trying to recover from some disease, it takes multiple tries, though there is something to beginner's luck. But I did not make it the first time, but I am thinking of retrying. I will be retrying using the ketogenic diet. And I happily managed to reduce my dose of medication by 50% effect. So from 75% dopamine or 70% dopamine antagonism, I got it down to 35% successfully. And that's about a 75% reduction in the medication dose in in terms of the milligrams you take, though each milligram. But in terms of dopamine, it's about a 50% cut in the effectiveness of the medication. So I was very pleased to reduce my dose of medication. I was able to get by with less sleep, and I was able to function at a higher level. I was able to interact with children in a more engaged kind of way, where I didn't feel like there was a kind of a delay or a veil in terms of my thinking, and I was able to consider driving when I lowered my dose, because once again my reflexes were more accessible. So it was a success using the True Hope, the B3, the cerebral allergies. I also exercised. I also took fish oil. I also tried to stay occupied. I attended church for a period. I cried now and then, if you want to know, but because I'm an emotional person. But but so these tips, they're not just they've helped many people, including myself, is what I'm trying to say. So the studies have hundreds of people, some of them. Abram Hoffer treated thousands of people using B3. Other people used B3 in hospitals and treated thousands of people with success. Jaku Sekala treated thousands of people using the open dialogue method. Keto has been used on hundreds of patients with success. True Hope has been used on hundreds and thousands of patients with success. Cerebral allergies, exercise is fish oil also has a lot of research behind it. So all of these are kind of well-researched modalities, except for maybe the carnivore diet and the Helmuth therapy, which are a little more speculative. And the benefits of church I only saw in one study, so that's a little more speculative too, and tearfulness. But most of these things are backed up by multiple studies, and I can attest personally that they've helped me personally also. So, Lyle Murphy from Alternative to Meds, who uses the orthomolecular treatments that Abram Hoffer developed, and he achieved a 75% success rate in getting people off antipsychotics. So 24% could not get off their antipsychotic. So hopefully you can be in that 75%. That gives you a 3 out of 4 odds of recovering from schizophrenia. So, you know, though maybe his bipolar patients had slightly higher odds. So, but once again, Abram Hoffer had a 65% recovery rate if ill for 10 plus years. So if you have chronic schizophrenia, you can successfully recover, even if you've had it for many years. I do recommend kind of the order of these therapies, with the most effective at the start. And so True Hope, then vitamin B3, cerebral allergies are also important in conjunction with those. Socialization therapies are important, though it's harder to do those by yourself. But all of these things should be considered and potentially tried as you attempt to make a drug-free recovery from schizophrenia. And do note that recovery rates are actually lower on medication. So they've once again developed the perfect pill. These pharmaceutical companies have developed the perfect pill that makes you, doesn't cure you, but makes you dependent on the pill for the rest of your life. And that's how they can make most of their money. So there are, evil masterminds trying to make as much money as possible by screwing over and swindling the less fortunate and the less intelligent members that are not members of the kind of psychiatric priest class that kind of abuses their mystical belief in synthetic drugs, which I find somewhat detestable, to be honest. So there is a 2x better recovery rate, though, if you are on the minimum effective dose. So if you were on it's better to take the least amount of medication as possible. So it's 4.7 times lower on medication. If your doctor tries to reduce your dose until you start getting symptoms, raise your dose a little bit. Reduce it until you start getting symptoms, raise it just a little bit. Then you have a 2x better recovery rate. I actually wrote a paper. So if you go to my blog post at the bottom, there's a link to my scientific paper that goes through recovery rates in the pre-antipsychotic period and in the post-antipsychotic period and compares them. So it turns out shock therapy had a better recovery rate than antipsychotics do, though I'm happily I'm happy they're not using shock therapy because it had its own issues, and perhaps it would have been better to use psychological treatments than shock therapy, which was kind of the modality before medication and antipsychotics came out. Though I will note Hoffer did use antipsychotics. So he was the pioneer in kind of treating patients with vitamins and minerals, but he also did use antipsychotics. So that's kind of a little bit of a contradiction there. I don't know why he continued to use antipsychotics. Some of his patients didn't recover, because there are schizophrenics who don't recover, and some of those patients may have been helped by antipsychotics, though he seems to have used psychiatric meds on many of his patients along with vitamin and mineral therapies. So maybe he thought they were complementary, though today we basically know that it's better to use orthomolecular treatments of vitamins and minerals and exercise and lifestyle than it is to use antipsychotics, and they're not exactly complementary. In fact, often they're contradictory to each other in terms of helping you recover. And actually, people who use antipsychotics or antidepressants or anti-anxiety medication are less likely to recover from their disease than those who do not use them. I will note, if you can't get access to an antipsychotic because you can't get a prescription from these high priests, then you can always smoke CBD oil. Or smoked full spectrum CBD, marijuana is just as effective as an antipsychotic. You can take it orally or you can smoke it. You absorb more of it if you smoke it. So it's cheaper if you smoke the CBD marijuana, if you can get a CBD strain of marijuana. Though they recommend full spectrum, so CBD, CBN, and a little bit of THC is also in full spectrum, but not very much. And that is just as effective as an antipsychotic. So I hope you enjoyed this presentation. I think you can recover from schizophrenia. Many people do. I have not successfully recovered, but once again, I successfully cut my medication dose in terms of milligrams by 75%, in terms of effectiveness by 50%. So I am a walking example of someone who has benefited from these naturopathic treatments. And so I think many of them would benefit you, maybe not all of them, but certainly some of them would likely benefit you. And so give them a try. Once again, about 75% of people can get off their antipsychotic, according to Lyle Murphy, who practices the same practices I practice to a large degree. I don't know his exact protocol, but it's similar to using orthomolecular treatments and other treatments that I mentioned here. And then Abram Hoffer, of course, had examples of about 65% of his chronic patients recovering from schizophrenia and 80% of his non-chronic patients, his newly diagnosed patients, recovering from schizophrenia. So you should, I guess, you have about a 3 out of 4 chance of recovery. And I hope you're at one of those 3 out of 4. And do note that you may need to take a low dose of the antipsychotic for the rest of your life if you've had become habituated to it. But I think the prognosis for schizophrenia, based on this video and the research that has been done, should no longer be considered poor. I think people have a high chance. The prognosis, there was a law of quarters, which a quarter of people would recover well from schizophrenia. There should be a law of 3/4. So 3/4 of people should achieve wellness from their schizophrenia if they use best practices. And people aren't interested in best practices, largely for monetary reasons, in terms of what the industrial government healthcare system provides. But I think the winds of change are blowing, and I believe that many people will find this video. They'll find other videos like Lauren Kennedy West's videos, who has 300,000 subscribers and who has documented her recovery using the ketogenic diet. And there's other people who are working within government. There's people who are working in industries to try and change the paradigm of schizophrenia care and allow that 3/4 of people to achieve wellness, as opposed to really it's more like 10% to achieve wellness currently. Currently only about 6 to 4% of people who have schizophrenia work. So Abram Hoffer got that up to 65%. So that's a vast improvement. That's over a 10x improvement using these methods that have been developed compared to the current standard of care, which is not evidence-based medicine, but is monetary-based medicine, based on industry capture at the moment. But I do think people who profess to care about the mentally ill may one day, quite soon, and I think Robert F. Kennedy has discovered this. I think Donald Trump has discovered this. I think many other people have discovered this, but that the paradigm should be changed, and that the cost savings to society easily justify. So everyone does better except the healthcare industry in terms of money. And I think even the healthcare industry could potentially do better if they implemented these treatment modalities as opposed to the current treatment modalities that are used. But let's all get together and pray that the system will change to a more caring and health-oriented system. And I think in the meantime, don't wait for the system to change, because you can always operate on the outskirts of the system and use these therapies yourself. So feel free to try these therapies. I think you'll see a tremendous benefit, just the same way as I myself have seen a tremendous benefit. So thank you for watching. I hope you enjoyed the video, and have yourself a good night.